Everybody that's to be here.
Yeah.
Okay,
We're good.
What's that?
Did you ever get rehydrated after a fort? I saw you there sweating that long.
My check liver light just went off.
Okay.
Okay, let's go ahead and begin. And you want to, since this is
Oh,
what you
yeah,
want to do?
I'm the one that kind of asked for this work session, and I was just wanting to know what the planning commission's thoughts were on these SUPs. SUPs, or should we keep doing them, not doing them, or rezone them? Or
I think we need to get rid of them.
does anybody have any opinion on that?
Oh, I got one.
Okay.
The SUPs aren't the problem. As we've discussed before in chamber, it's only about 1 to 2% of them that are a problem for our community. Those 1 or 2%.
Just a second. You need to come up where we can, where you'll be on a mic. See, that's why I said we needed to switch. We're going to have a recorded things. Thank you.
The general SUP policy is not our problem in Leavenworth County. Our problem is any SUP that has KDHE in the wording anywhere, anyhow, is where the problem lies. It doesn't seem that the state wants to have the counties back on, let's just say 50% of the situations. Therefore, I think the county needs to step up. We need to put some limitations on these SUPs that involve KDHE, be there rubble landfills, C&D landfills, anything with their name in the wording. Because we can't seem to get any help from the state when we have a problem with these. So if we could put a limitation on those, a yearly review, even every 2 years, I think that is a great start to fixing the problems we have with the 2% of the SUPs.
And those tend to be high impact SUPs, I think. The ones that you would tend to have KDHE's involvement tend to be a high impact.
Totally, yes.
So those could be in a different category.
But, we've had others that, that we've approved and got sued, we've denied and got sued. Every time we go to sue, we got a $10,000 deductible plus attorney fees. Even when you win, you still lose. So I did know, talk about rezone. I mean, it's spot rezoning, but we've got a lot of spot rezoning in the county already.
Isn't that what a special use permit is?
Well, temporary, I guess.
Well, it's temporary, it's only for that use, and you don't know if you rezone it. That use might be there only for a year or two, and then who knows what can go there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's what I like about SUPs versus rezoning. If you issue an SUP, then it's specific for that business. So you can control a little bit, hey, this is not going to be a strip club, it's going to be a mechanic shop. But if you rezone it as business, you can't control what kind of business goes in there. It could originally have been done for a mechanic shop, but then they sell it and down the road it becomes strip club or whatever the neighborhood doesn't like.
I think you're right about what you're saying on the SUPs. I think it's been on such a small percentage that maybe we need to put some more teeth into it. And KDHE lately has been one of the issues that we've had to talk to and spend a lot of time with. Lawsuits are going to come at you no matter what you do. The thing is, can you protect yourself enough by putting enough legalities into it to maybe improve it a little bit?
But we're not even, it doesn't seem that with the special use permits that we're not, I know that the staff says it's because it doesn't comport with the comprehensive plan or whatever, so they recommend denial, but the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends approval, and that just doesn't, the two of those to me don't seem to go together. I mean, we have to begin to figure out how are we going to handle this, because when we have a lack of consistency, if you tell one person, yes, we're going to give you a special use permit, and then another person, no, we're not going to give you a special use permit, then we're also asking for trouble. So we've got to figure out a way of being consistent even when the recommendations are being made, that they be consistent, and that the Board of County Commissioners are consistent with whether or not we approve or don't approve a special use permit. I mean, that's from my perspective. Part of what has caused some of our lawsuits has been because we have not been consistent in how we approve or not a use permit, and whether or not it is, follows the, and I know the comprehensive plan is a guide. It is not. It's a working, moving document. But then but when we have, I'll look at something and it'll say staff recommends denial, and then I see the planning and zoning says 8-0 approving it. It's like there's a disconnect, and we need to fix that disconnect as well, because that's just my opinion.
Planners are recommending denial because it doesn't fit the comprehensive plan.
Right.
And I understand that, but we allow special use permit. So how can you say we allow special use permits if we say you can't go against the comprehensive plan? So it's either one or the other, and the only reason they're recommending denial in most all the cases is because of the comprehensive plan. But we allow those things to happen with special use permits.
Yeah. A lot of them are for the good of the county. Which I know you guys can watch our films and you can watch and see what's going on, and based on that the county plan, and they'll tee that up. But the reason that we're recommending disapproval is because it's not in accordance with the plan. Well, there are those cases where we're going to get additional, as Jeff said, we're going to get 2 additional rooftops out of this with additional families, additional whatever, or it could be a small business, whatever. By years ago when we wrote the plan, we didn't have that in consideration, and now we do. So do we not want to utilize the special use permit that's going to add to and bring to the better of Leavenworth County, which is A, it meets the business, or B, we're adding more families to our county as well. Right?
Mark, there's one thing I think you hit on it again. Good to see you, by the way. Is when the Planning Commission brings us forward, we appoint all of y'all to do that, and we get to make the decision on most things at the end. I like the independent thinking. I don't want the county commissioners, or at least for me, to ever lead y'all in a direction that I think fits what you're supposed to be saying. I want to hear what you're doing, and if y'all believe 6.2, 8.0, whatever, that it fits for the rooftops, I have no problem with that because it comes finally. What I don't want to say is anybody pressure anybody to change some things just to fit their little area. I want to hear it from everyone elected, because we appoint you to serve at the pleasure of the county and the county commissioner. So I understand. I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, there's a lot of work that goes. I mean, there's a lot of dialogue, and you can see that. I mean, we're talking a lot, and sometimes way too much. We're concerned about fire extinguishers. We're concerned about security cameras on buildings. I mean, it's just going long, and that wasn't the intent of the special use permit. But we're going down those roads too. But there is that dialogue, Vicki. You're spot on. And we have this plan. This is the plan. We want to stick to this plan. But we also want the growth. We want the industry growth. We want the community growth. We want the right. So somewhere we got to meet the medium. Okay. That's my only thing is based on the priorities that I know that you all are wanting, and I'm listening to you. Then we want to bring in industry. We want to bring in these. We want to bring in more communities. We want to bring in. We want to grow. We want to build that tax base as well. That's kind of where we're at. Is thank you. I appreciate it, but by your tone, I can tell that this is the only reason that we're recommending disapproval. This really meets and it's those one-offs. And you're right. Those one-offs probably bring lawsuits.
Right.
Right. And
you're right. They do.
When you're talking about, do you think the recent, policy that the board passed about business would have to upgrade the road, do you think that's going to hurt any of our SUPs or any future business?
Well, what do you mean upgrade the road? I mean, they have to upgrade a gravel road for half a mile, yeah, that's going to kill them.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
But-
talking about.
Yeah.
Or a blacktop road for
Yeah,
2
I mean,
miles.
we used to do that with subdivisions.
Mhm.
If they had a subdivision on a gravel road, they had to hard surface the road until the next hard surface road. But I think that went away too.
Right.
Yeah.
'Cause it was killing.
We got some roads built because of that.
Right.
Yeah.
But now we're, I guess.
That's a darn good idea. We need to go back to that. Let's put a subdivision out in the middle of nowhere, pave the road.
Well, there's some, I hear you, I don't want to argue with you, but there's some pluses and minuses in that. You know, some of the folks in our good county don't want the road paved because now we just increased traffic and we just increased speed and we just traffic, okay? And they like their privacy. So a subdivision on a gravel road in the middle of nowhere, they kind of, okay, I'm good with it because the only people really traveling it is really the folks and the traffic's down and the dust is down and whatever.
As long
We
as
go
it's
to
private
paving
road.
it and we just increase the highway because they will fly up and down.
They are
But
public
I would-
roads.
I would-
But you see what I'm saying? It's like it's a give and take.
I know,
It's
but,
like-
you know, we talked about,
Yeah.
we're working on the budget right now.
Yeah.
And we're feeling the pain. We don't have as many houses coming on the tax rolls as
Right.
we did in previous years. And I think next year is going to be worse. And I don't know what your thoughts are on how do we get some more rooftops.
I think you're all saying it. I think if the builder is building the neighborhood, they pave the freaking road. And the county may have to update and maintain the road afterwards,
Well, but-
part of the building is you've got to pay or
Well-
chip and seal or something.
Well, what
That
about
would help
subdivision?
sell- that would help sell
Well,
those
if
lots.
they're doing internal streets and they're, you know, it's not like they're doing it all.
And they obviously should be there if they're close to a city, because the city eventually is going to pick them up.
Yes.
But it's 10 or 20 years. So you know, it's one thing we looked at and we got away from, and I supported, even when I was out in Lansing, was a joint group to work, planning commissions working with the other planning commissions, and for this 1 mile outside, so you could tell each other what's going, because some folks are going to want to come in this city eventually, or their services, they're going to have to get services, the city can provide that. So if you're close to a city and they're looking at a subdivision like that, I think hard surface roads would be a must then.
Well, don't we have 2 classes of subdivisions anyways? One that's closer to the city?
Yes.
We have a class A and B or an A and C? A and C? That's
Yes.
already being
We
done
we
then.
already do that.
What I was talking about, Commissioner, is I don't think we got the conversation going with the other communities that we were trying to form a few years ago so we could have a sit down on things like this.
Oh, when we were wanting to get their comprehensive plans.
Yeah.
Mike has something.
I don't know, John, I don't want to put you on the spot because we had a conversation about these SUPs today. Are you prepared to kind of explain kind of what your thinking on this is?
I think there are some options available out there that we could present to the Planning Commission and the BOCC that would address a lot of the SUP concerns. I think an expansion of the use table for home-based businesses would take a lot of the SUPs off the table. We're internally looking at some of those questions right now. I think classification of SUP based on intensity of use and timelines are another component of that. I'm not prepared to present an entire plan to you this evening at a study session, but I would be happy to do so in the future. I think there are some viable options there that address your concerns.
I just think
I know that's if you could take a good number of those SUPs that are the low impact SUPs and take them off the table, then the ones we deal with is the ones that
Right,
are
but-
more problematic.
we need to have it right, but we also need to figure out a way of addressing. There comes a point oftentimes, especially when we're having a home base or a smaller business, that it can outgrow what the intent was for that special use permit because the business has grown and begun to flourish. And we have a business right now, I cannot remember exactly which one it is, but they started off with a special use permit and they did exactly what I thought was the best possible outcome.
Countertop,
The
yeah.
countertop was that it was in his home-based small business, that he
Lasted
had the
about 2
special use
years.
permit, And he had said, once he gets up and running and his business begins to grow and he, increases volume, then he plans to move. And that's exactly what he did. And he went into an area that was zoned for an industry or a business. And to me, that's something that we need to be very cognizant of as we're looking at special use permits when we're granting them, that we need to kind of be a little bit forward thinking. Is this actually, if they say, well, we intend that we're only going to have 15 vehicles a week or a day or whatever, but when you look and you consider what it might be, and if your business begins to grow and that grows to 30, well, you have a different impact at that point. And I think that we need to begin to have a method and a means of addressing that and making certain that we let people know that a special use permit does not constitute permanently if you grow to a point where you need to move into a different type of environment. Because then when we're saying we're going to let you go into a residential area and all of a sudden you have tripled your business volume, you're no longer the good neighbor who is not impacting the roads or the people that are around you. You're beginning to negatively impact the entire intent, which is where I personally think we need to look at how we make sure that we look at that as we're approving permits like that.
Well, we need to push it to our industrial parks.
Right, but which is what we should be doing.
We just had one last meeting that was building a shop with no house. Didn't live there. I don't know why that wasn't going to go to an industrial park.
I don't either.
That's where that one should have gone.
Well, but we pushed him toward it, and the issue became economics. He owned the land, and so he hadn't planned to move to the land, but he owned the land. He wanted to put his shop up there, and going to a business park, suddenly, he had to get a new space for it, another economic output. And to your point, I mean, and that's why I said, I was part of the 880 to approve it, is young man had a plan, he had a vision, it appeared that he was going to be a good citizen. And our discussions about moving to a business park, a shop, an automotive restoration shop, doesn't necessarily fit in our particular business park situations. But I think your concern about, they can't stay there forever becomes one of enforcement. And so we approve an SUP for a young guy who's going to build a restoration shop. And suddenly he brings on 2 or 3 technicians, and he adds a paint booth, and he adds this, that, and the other thing. That's enforcement. If we put on him the provisions that we did, or the
Conditions.
The conditions that we did, if we put on the conditions that we did, it becomes incumbent on him, not on the county, to say, okay, I've exceeded the conditions. That's what we've set up, because we don't necessarily, unless a neighbor turns them in, we don't necessarily have enforcement that says, we gave you come in and let's review your SUP. We don't have a process that says that.
And that's typically how they're enforced, is a neighbor will complain.
Correct.
Right.
But the thing about the guy getting a bigger, having a bigger shop and this, that, and growing unconstrained, I think that's partially on us, the county, to go out and say, hey, these were the conditions that we put on you. And we put a lot of conditions on that one that we did last month.
But are they enforceable? What we run into, that's where we run into are they enforceable? That's one of the things that I think
our lawyers tell us if we put the conditions on them, they're supposed to be enforceable. I mean, if we're putting conditions on that aren't enforceable, then we should stop doing that, or we should stop doing SUPs completely.
Oh.
And just say you can't have a shop in your garage on your land. I mean,
I think the problem is what you just hit, and that is we're all going to agree. I think the problem is what you just hit, and we're all agreeing in that. I mean, I think 100% of us are agreeing in that is how do you enforce it? We couldn't pay enough enforcement people to ride around in a truck with a little light to pull up and go, hey, you're in violation of da 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 da. Because we would be spending all our time all over this entire county doing it. Because you're exactly right, Vicki. The cabinet guy started out. I was furious when you guys proved that because I knew I was buying the land next to it, and I said, I'm not buying that land now. He's going to run a full-up business out of it. We had the same thing out Tonganoxie Road where we got a contractor that's got dump trucks and all kinds of stuff. I mean, he grew well. There's no enforcement on him, none. He planted trees all around to block everything so you can't see. But it's it should be
I agree
a
with
business
you.
industry park. It should be in a park,
Right.
So, but how do we enforce it? And that's some of the things that we all talk about all the time is where's the enforcement? We're giving special use permits, and then there's no follow-up. There's no come back and recap. By this year, by this time, it's been 3 years, 4 years. Let's go back and review. I don't know. I don't know how to
But
crack
for all
that.
that follow-up that you create, you're creating the bureaucracy. And how much of a bureaucracy do the people of Leavenworth County want?
well, then
Well, once again, we gave them, it's a special use permit. We didn't give you, God granted forever, you get to do whatever you want and no one checks up on you. It's a special use permit. We should check up on them. You don't get it forever. If you outgrow it, then you got to go somewhere else.
But we have building codes we don't check up on.
Well, there's that. Exactly.
You're right.
John, did you have something you wanted to add?
Only if I'm asked. I would say that again, I think that a joint study session over the SUP issues is probably warranted. And again, I think there are viable concerns, but I also think there are viable answers that
Okay.
you could incorporate, turn into policy relatively easily that would release some of the burden of the SUP as it's been enforced to date in Leavenworth County. So again, I'm not prepared to put a plan together today, but I do have some ideas on it, and I'll talk to Mark about that, and we'll get a date set and have another joint session and work through those issues.
Would the planning board be interested in that?
Sure. Hey, as long as you all are providing lunch or dinner and whatever.
We provide water.
You may be the club too.
Can I go back to Commissioner Smith's point about transportation, because I think we're beating a dead horse with SUPs right now. On the transportation, we had one back some time ago. It was to rezone a very large plot of land that was surrounded by dirt roads, and it caused a lot of conversation about why the developer should not hook into a feeder or an arterial or whatever route if they're going to develop a subdevelopment with 100 or so homes. And the same question came about sewers, about sanitary sewers versus septics and so forth. And so the point I'm getting to is, I was saying we shouldn't allow this as a development, and it kept coming back to all we're doing is rezoning. We're just making the land available. When they want to get a permit, that's when we'll talk about that. But apparently we don't. And so I think there's a disconnect in there somewhere that when a developer, if a developer wants to build this house, it was down south of 70, so it's kind of in no man's land down there. But if a developer wanted to come in and develop that into RR 2.5s, well, at some point when they come back, that there should be a requirement for them to hook, because it was all gravel roads. We know that if they're doing a complete development, they're going to develop streets within the property. But then it's going to end on a gravel road. And so, from a commissioner's standpoint, I would think that there would be something that we would want to say in the permitting process for a development such as that, that if we're going to permit this development, not just zone it and build a plat for it, but we're going to permit them to come in and build those 100 residences, that there should be some developer-required responsibilities to somehow tie to a feeder, a paved feeder, especially in our more undeveloped areas.
You're talking about this one off of County Road 25, I believe, in south of I-70?
Yeah.
Okay, you're talking about a subdivision with internal streets coming out on a gravel road?
Well, all we were doing was zoning
Right.
a large agricultural piece to a 2.5.
So when the plat comes in, you're talking about addressing it then.
But we're not.
Could that turn into a benefit district and be put onto the lots on an exterior road or not?
Is that our responsibility?
Well,
I'm just throwing it out there.
John, you got to go ahead, please.
I would say that you probably want to weigh that on a case-by-case basis based on your transportation plan, and that would certainly be off-site improvements. So there would be some consideration there that the commission would have to make. So.
But we can have requirements on those interior roads.
Well, the
Interior roads.
Right.
Right. We've done a number of those.
But anything
Right.
outside of the defined subdivision would be a different animal altogether. But benefit districts have been used in many jurisdictions in the past. However, I would defer to Mark and to the county attorney to get any deeper into that.
Okay, well, we're getting to another one of my concerns is the Panasonic plant, and we've got 2 pet food plants at Tonganoxie. And does the planning commission think we have enough homes available for all this?
No, we don't.
Well, if we don't, then all we're going to do is raise the price of existing homes, and then we're going to do comparable sales to yours that somebody overpaid, and then that's how we're going to base your taxes.
Have you tried to sell anything lately? Because you're not getting the prices you got a year ago.
And I understand
These
that.
appraisers, they're cutting prices 25 to 30% right
Okay,
now.
and what do you think that's going to do to the county's coffers next year?
Well, that's going to put a dent in it.
It's going to put a huge dent in it. So we need more people to help pay for this somehow.
Well, then we're going to have to give some incentives to some of these builders that to get going on some houses.
If we don't have no place for them to build them,
Well, there you go. That's right.
well, I'm concerned because I mean this year's budget is pretty difficult,
And I think that kind of with what you're saying, I don't think that the price, maybe the people who own the homes are asking less because it used to be it was like name your price, and now because we have the interest rates that have gone up, we have I think that our property insurance is, as Mr. Riley could probably tell you, is beginning to creep up on us, for people, your homeowners and all those things. So those things are starting to go up. So now it's becoming more of a buyer's market, yes. But if there's a shortage, you're still going to have people wanting homes, and people are going to be willing to pay more for their homes. It's just how much more.
That's exactly.
Yeah, I got one question too, and I'm going to direct it. I see Mike back there hiding. Mike, if I could just, if I be allowed to, we've seen when I was sitting there in Lansing, we were growing houses like 100, 150 a month. You're cutting me down. Then you went down the Baser. What is it we're missing that we're not able to? And we've got land. Lansing just put in millions of dollars of sewers. Well, we've got land. What is the component that you see, or the gentleman next to you, that is causing the economy is what it is, but is there something that you could see that we should be taking a look at a little different than how our approach is? I heard one gentleman say incentives. What do you think, Mike?
Please, so we can hear the we being people that are listening. Come there too.
Here you go.
Yeah.
Right there.
Oh, man. That's a deep question, Commissioner.
You're welcome.
I would tell you, I don't think the county commission or planning commission can, make
Right.
rules or decisions based off market value. First of
Right.
all, the market values that have been thrown out here, I think, are completely false. We're not seeing those kind of reductions in valuations typically right now. We're seeing fewer deals. I think Dan would probably echo that. But as far as houses dropping 25, 30%, that's not what is indicative of Leavenworth County, at least for the most part. Obviously, there's going to be anomalies along the way. For growth, I would tell you, I think obviously, job growth is the most critical thing. I mean, Leavenworth County is, a bedroom community at this point in time. We're going to be impacted by things like Panasonic, by the American Royal, by everything that's happening in and around us. I think the main thing that the county could do is plan, access is critical. Access to things like I-70 is critical. When you start going out in the county as opposed to city, right, you're talking about taking advantage of Panasonic, which is going to be a huge event, whether it's Tonganoxie, Base, or South County.
So you're talking about the addition of the additional turnpike entrance would be
100%.
Yeah.
That would be
1,000%. If Baser doesn't get, I say Baser, between
Baser,
K7 and the Tonganoxie, County Road 2, if Leavenworth County doesn't get a free exit on I-70, it's an absolute shame. 100%. That ought to be priority one. Growth will come if people can get to you. Right now, no one can get to us. I'm going to be honest with you. That's the part of the problem. They can go to Tonganoxie and pay. That's going to impact things when you got to pay to get on and off every day, right? Not everyone's going to drive 20 minutes to Tonganoxie to get on I-70. So you got K7 and you got Tonganoxie. There absolutely has to be I-70 interchange somewhere along 166th Street. Without a doubt, and I'm not picking a spot.
I know.
I'm just telling you.
I think that's spot is
So,
talked about.
I think when you start talking about planning and I'm assuming you just don't zone without a particular plan right in place. You're not just allowing somebody to come into zone without a plat. I don't think you are.
I hope not. It's happened.
Yeah, so you develop your plan, you develop your plat, the zoning's tied to that. If they don't record that plat within a year, everything's gone, right? Not the case? It's already, it's zoned. Once it's zoned, it's zoned.
It's rezoned,
Yeah.
yeah.
What?
What you also have to remember on these companies that are coming in, who is going to be your customers? I think you're going to see a lot of younger buyers in that market.
being affordable.
More techie buyers in that market. So they're going to want probably not your acreage.
Apartments,
They're going to want
condos.
even condos, and they're going to want infrastructure close by. They're definitely going to want high-speed internet and all those things. So those are things when you start planning on dealing with those people that are coming in is something you really need to consider highly. Look at all the apartments that are going up. I don't think you can go anywhere in the Kansas City area you don't see.
Oh, they're everywhere.
Being built right and left.
Yeah.
And
Up there in the
I think
Legends.
that's where a lot of that is going, but a lot of them will be attached homes, townhomes, condominiums and stuff like that too, where they can purchase.
But we need to change some of our culture and some of the attitudes and things and kind of get rid of the not in my backyard type thing for those types of developments, for the multi-use. I mean, that if we're wanting to get people to buy into doing the condos or the townhouse or apartment complexes, you have to kind of reduce the fear of
Yeah.
what that brings. And I
Yeah.
think Lansing learned very quickly what a benefit it
It was, but I took a
But it's
beating out
hard.
That's
there.
not
for-
a county, that's not a county
No.
development, guys.
No,
I mean,
but
the
I'm just
county
saying-
development is a rural setting. Now, you should look at a 1 acre tract as opposed to a 2.5 acre tract minimum. Still on septic, which I believe is approved by KDHE, still possible.
Engineer.
I think you should look at that 100%. You should push density as far as multifamily or small lot.
Right, that's what-
Absolutely to the cities. There are parts of our cities, most of our cities, that couldn't support some of those developments because they don't have the infrastructure in place,
Right, I
whether
just-
it's sewer, water, or whatever.
I'm just saying, but we have to begin to change even as we speak and as we talk about things that development that may happen in certain portions of the county. In southern Leavenworth County are probably the first ones that are being kind of like overwhelmed with the growth. But it seems that it's probably inevitable. But changing the culture and beginning to have people understand the benefits that come with that is what I mean. And if we don't speak to that,
Totally.
whether we're at the city level or at the county level, or just in general, we need to improve the thinking that everybody doesn't have to have the 3-bedroom house, that you can also have a 3-bedroom condominium that goes up that's equally as nice, and the amenities that go with it, that just kind of getting people to understand that, especially when we have the younger buyers that are not wanting to keep up with properties and all of those things. And it's a whole different generation. And, I'm one of those boomers that, I'm used to wanting the big house and the big yard, 3 cars and all those things. But
I'll end it with this because I know there's other people who need to talk. But from my perspective, I would say for county development, for me, the biggest thing is some clarity, as opposed to always shifting and changing what might be acceptable and what might not be. In other words, and also who's in charge, right? I mean, I had a deal approved from the county commission or the planning commission, county commission that almost got shut down by a fire chief.
right.
Yeah.
Well, that's,
And I'm
that's
not
on my
picking on
list,
that
too.
fire chief. I'm just telling you, I thought it was advisory only from a fire chief. Obviously, we moved forward, but that's a concern from a developer to get to a certain level to have then somebody say you can't do this after it's been approved.
Well,
So some clarity, I think, would be good. I think for us as a developer, I think it's imperative for our county to grow and use land properly, to look at acre lots, smaller lots. I don't think you're going to go less than that. You're not going to get sewer in the county. You're not going to get internet in the county to the extent that you need it. Water's critical. You ought to look at a water
but if the water
single
district
water
can provide
company.
you
You ought to look at
water,
Water One, Leavenworth County is what you ought to look at.
well,
Mike, that's easier said than done. I can make that happen.
yeah, well, that's
I-70.
That's not going to happen.
I-70,
so-
I-70, I-70.
That's not going to happen. So, but back on that, if the water district can provide a fire protection, they will. But if they can't, they can't. And
Right.
we
But
can't
that's-
tell them they have to.
That's one of the risks of
There is
living
no
out
fire
in the
protection in
county.
the county.
Yeah,
Be
that's
honest.
one of the risks of
Yeah.
living in the county.
No
is
fire
that
protection in the county.
We have a fire department.
That's just
That's,
life-saving
to me, that
measures.
ought to be the only question you ask. Is this in your township?
It's life-saving
Yeah.
measures. It's the
They're going to show up.
Thank you, Mike.
EMS.
But earlier today, we were talking about our local service budget, which is these roads out in the county. It's gotten better in the last probably 6-8 years. It used to be a whole lot worse, but we're still nowhere close to collecting enough funds to maintain these roads. We're having to take money out of the road and bridge budget. That's why I think it's so critical that we have more houses out there on these roads to help pay for the maintenance of these roads. And anybody that's worked on budgets for any time has seen what's going on. But my biggest concern is we're going to have a drop off in the new homes, and it's going to really hurt that budget. Because it's not getting any cheaper to maintain them. We just need more people to help pay for them. And that's what brings me, a few weeks ago, John brought up about the, what do you call them, block lengths or something in the subdivisions.
Yes.
I don't think Public Works, being an old public works guy, that's we're going to have to maintain these roads, extra roads. I don't know. Some of these subdivisions won't even get more houses on them, I don't think. But I thought I don't know if that's going to hurt development or not. I don't know. Any thoughts? Planning Commission?
Were you talking about the length of the cul-de-sacs or
The
connectivity?
Connectivity. If they, connectivity is different now. I'm not, if you could connect a road to another road, I agree. But if we're just going in, like the one we did on County Road 2 back in 18 or 19, Lexi Lane, I believe.
Right.
Right. I thought we changed the policy then, or did we just grant a variance or exception? Did we grant an exception on that?
What we did, we allowed it, but I don't.
It was before me. I believe there was an exception made, but there was also a language amendment for only the cul-de-sac links. That amendment did not touch block link.
Okay.
Right, so just to reiterate that, we're speaking about block length, but in reality, we're talking about street network systems within the subdivisions themselves, which the current regulations require 750 feet, or it can go up to 1,200 feet for just cause. And that exists in the regulations as it stands today. Those weren't new amendments.
Right.
They were there.
Right. I know, but I thought we did something back then. But so if they can connect, some of these won't be just dead ends. Will they be? These could all be dead end.
Well, they won't all be dead end.
They won't all
sections.
be. But if they can connect, they can connect. But if they can't connect, so they would be dead.
A lot of times in most subdivisions, in most areas, you are going to have one street that is a dead end, either with a cul-de-sac, a Class D barricade, a hammerhead, so that the adjoining property, when it does develop, has a public road to attach to. If you don't have that section, then you don't have that interconnectivity between subdivisions, which I assume is why they put that regulation in the subdivision regulations. That's typical of most.
So we came from a point where your office was not enforcing these, and now we are. So can you kind of talk us through how that change occurred?
Well, I can't speak to what happened prior to me being here, but I can tell you that the regulation was in place. The projects that were in line when I got here, if they had made it to the Planning Commission or they had a preliminary plat approved, those projects were unimpeded by any interpretation. Anything that was at a preliminary stage or above, after that, I asked that they comply with these regulations, which is why we had the study session to verify with the BOCC that you wanted these enforced. After that study session is when we started enforcing these regulations.
How did it come to light? I mean, did it just come to light when you were researching that this wasn't being enforced? Or?
Well, there were a couple of subdivisions that came in that seemed to me on first review that they had extremely long cul-de-sac lengths, meaning that the section of road that led to the cul-de-sac bulb was extremely long with no intersecting streets. So I started going through the regulations and I asked staff and they said, well, you need to take a look at it. And I did, and I found that regulation. Talking with staff, they said, well, we're not sure how that's been enforced in the past, so I put that on a study session, one of the first things I did when I got here. And again, it was there. I wanted to verify that it was your intent to enforce that. After that study session, it's been enforced.
I just realized after being communicated with a number of people about how the enforcement had changed.
Well, again, anything that was already in the process that had made it to the Planning Commission was unimpeded by any of these interpretations. Anything that was at a preliminary stage or at the preliminary stage these were brought up. So again, that's the appropriate time to do it. I can't wait to do that down the road. If you say that's your intent, then it's my job to enforce that intent.
I agree.
Okay.
Yep.
I think it really stood out on Pheno Estates. There was no connectivity there to the east where the commercial was. So there was really limited access to commercial in the frontage, and actually no sewer extension that could go there from the sewer. So that's where connectivity, and of course that's sewer, we're not talking about in the county about sewers, but road is important. You don't know what's going to be there 10 years, 20 years, 50 years from now, and that's planning.
I could take you to areas that have not enforced this particular thing in northeast Johnson County, where you'll drive a half mile before you have another intersecting street with homes that are on 4,000 square foot lots. It's a critical issue for emergency responders in that particular area, and that's what I would like to avoid in Leavenworth County.
Good. I agree.
I think it should be enforced, but I think if people are kind of caught in the middle between going from not enforcing to enforcing, I think that's an issie too.
Well, but sometimes it's like that was then, this is now.
Have preliminary drawings done, you mean? Or made application? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
And that's one of those things about not being consistent and not following policy. And if it's not a good policy, change the policy. But if it is a policy, enforce it. I mean.
And if you can't enforce it, why have it?
Yeah, exactly. It's.
No, I think that's the direction we gave them, too, that department.
Yes, sir.
There's been several times where we've approved a rezoning, and I've asked the question, where's the road or the entrance going to be on this? And I'm told over and over, oh, that's not a problem, that's a problem for later. Well, I get it's a problem for later, but maybe sometimes we need all that information when we rezone a property. So we kind of do know where the roads are, the whole deal. We just kind of been introduced to these PUD.
Right.
Yeah.
And those seem to be like a really good idea. When it's represented, you see the streets, you know where everything is, you know where the fire hydrants are, you know where the exits are. I believe we need to see more of that.
I don't know if anybody's willing to put the money out there to do a plat and then apply for a rezone and not get the rezone. That could be pretty costly.
Right, that can be problematic.
Well, a lot of people are rezoning, just haven't rezoned for future
Right.
and don't have any plans to develop it
Right.
at the time at all. So.
Right.
Exactly. Next year's the election year. If 4 of you are gone, the new commission may come in and say, oh, no more 2.5 acre lots.
Only two of
There's only 2 of us.
There's only 2
There's
of them on
only 2 of
here.
us will be
Only 2 of them.
gone. We got 3.
Unless you know something I don't.
So it could change next year. We may.
Well, it'd be 2025.
We want to go to smaller lots. We want to go back to bigger lots. Everybody.
I don't think anybody's going to want to go back to bigger lots. People just don't. The people I talk to, they don't want 5 acres. And the ones that got 10 acres wish they'd have never even thought about buying 10 acres.
There's some that don't want 2.5.
Right. Well, that's true, Steve. You're right.
Which is where that's when you go to the city.
You've been around a long time. You remember when everybody wanted 10.
Yeah.
You know, so
40.
That was,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was wheel people.
Yeah.
so
If you wanted to develop a list, I would be happy to come back with options for the Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners that could address some of your issues in the future.
I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
I think,
Okay.
and I think the Planning Commission sounds like they would be interested in having that done, correct? Well, then.
I would
that's like
think so,
the direction
yeah.
We need to give to staff to move forward. And is there anything else you have? Because we have 10 minutes,
well, their meeting's at 5:30.
isn't it? Yes. Yeah. well,
I
so
got
I'm-
one at 6. So.
No, I'm trying to move this along. Is there anything else you
No,
have on your list, sir?
Move to adjourn.
Okay. Then I think we're finished.